So, how do we make the case? How do we make a legitimate business case if we're going to take a detour around the competitive way that job seekers get their positions, and that employers hold those high standards of expectations? If I'm hiring you now, I expect you to do what I have in mind for you. So either with support or without support, I expect you to do that. Well, it turns out there are some ways. And one of the clearest ways around workplace demand is meeting unmet needs. That within any workplace, in any business in the world, any place where people are paid to work, the demand situation is going to be the common way that people get work. And we're looking at a room full of people, 50, 60 of us in this room. And virtually every one of us got our jobs through a competitive process that had us competing against the demands of the employer and the other job seekers who wanted our job, and thank goodness we got it. And probably not too many of us, no matter how kind-hearted we are, feel so guilty that we've got our job that we step aside and say, I really don't deserve it, so why don't you come in and you take it, and I'll just become unemployed. So we're pretty clear. When competition works for us, it's not a bad thing, And yet, as we go about our jobs, now let's just bring it right into this room. As we go about our jobs, and all our brothers and sisters, our similar twins that are out there, functional twins in the world, as they go about their jobs, trying to meet demand, need occurs. In other words, we're not perfect. Things go undone in workplaces around the world. We had to deal with this in the States when we started blowing up rocket ships, taking people into outer space, and we realized that business that should be at the pinnacle of performance in our society, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, you would think those folks really wouldn't have a whole lot of unmet needs. We found out they have unmet needs all the time. Somebody doesn't check the O-ring on some Saturn rocket and it blows up, and it's a terrible thing because things go undone. And it turns out that unmet need is a very interesting aspect of a business, because even though employers don't necessarily tout their unmet needs, they don't want all of us to know about them, they all know the seamy underbelly of the workplace is they exist. And the very fact that they need to be done and aren't getting done tends to take it off the competitive demand. That if a certain job had a certain productivity or demand expectation, and then somebody wasn't doing it, the fact that someone else would then come in and do that, you can pretty well do it at your own pace, and it's appreciated because we really needed that done and nobody's doing it. Now, why don't employers think that way? It's a good question. They just don't. The employers the world over would presume that if I've got as much, I'm as fully staffed as possible, my demand is being met. And it's only when they think about it. So one of the ways we approach employers is through a different strategy. We don't ask them if they have open jobs. We ask them if they would consider looking to see if they have needs that need to be met. Because once we start doing that, we are unbundling that demand in a way, we'll show you a little later how discovery fits with this, of how specific contributions can meet those unmet needs. Now, there are some other business cases to be made. One of the things that Project Search has taught us very, very nicely is there are aspects of some jobs that better perform by others. It's still an unbundling of demand. But if you can go into a job that someone at a very high pay grade is being paid to do a mundane aspect of a job, and you could have someone of a different pay grade doing that, that is a business case. Now, of course, that's all. Now, it's not enough to, just as it's not enough to get the individual side done just to make the case for an employer, so too, it's not enough just to find a business need and say, well, that automatically fits the person. This is an equation to be solved. We're actually kind of taking algebraic functions and bringing it into employment. We've got to balance the equation. Both sides have to equal. So as we find employer needs, we need to make sure that fits with what the individual has to offer and is interested in offering. And then there are jobs needing, at times, specific assistance that, because of the unique nature of the people we represent, though they might not have complete whole package competitiveness to offer, they might have specific task competitiveness to offer. And if we can match those competitive abilities, specific ones, to specific employer need, we're still meeting business needs. This list will continue to evolve. Right now, this kind of 3 different ways to make the business case is been fully sufficient, both in what has evolved in the customized employment since around 2001 in the States, and as we've brought this information over here to Britain, and you guys have experienced similar stuff, we're seeing almost no distinction. Even though there are differences in our culture, we're not seeing differences in the way employers respond to this. And that's really good information to take forward.